If you liked the video, feel free to subscribe. We have battle reports, list videos, and other Warhammer 40K content every week. Thanks for watching, thanks for stopping by. This video is a deep dive on the Adeptus Custodes Witchseeker unit. This is a Psykana unit and my favorite Psykana chaff unit. If you have not used or are not sold on how useful these can be in our Custodes list, stick around while I try to convince you. If you already use this unit, there should be some tips and tricks in here for this unit you may not know of as we go through each detachment. And let's start by taking a look at the Witchseekers Datasheet. The Witchseekers have a movement of 6, toughness of 3, a 3-up save, 1 wound, 6 leadership, and an OC of 1. For the ranged weapons, they have the Witchseeker Flamer, ignores cover, and torrent, 12-inch range, D6 attacks, strength 4, AP 0, damage 1. Their melee weapons are the close combat weapon, 2 attacks each, hitting on 3s, strength 3, AP 0, damage 1. For the unit composition, you can take either 4, 5, 9, or 10 models. For the abilities, we have Daughters of the Abyss and Sanctified Flames. The Daughters of the Abyss ability, models in this unit have a 3+ feel no pain against psychic attacks and mortal wounds. Sanctified Flames, in your shooting phase after this unit has shot, select one enemy unit hit by one or more of those attacks. That enemy unit must take a battle shock test. There are 2 character units we can join to the Witchseekers. The first unit is a named character Leia, but she is more for our melee unit, the Vigilators. She helps them a lot more than the Witchseekers. The second unit is the Knight Centura, and this is pretty much the same thing. You can get a little bit of extra movement boost, but like a Leia, she mostly boosts the melee unit, the Vigilators. There are a few things to take away from the datasheet. 3+ save makes these hard to take out with a few shots from a small arms weapon. You do have to put a fair amount of small arm shots into these Witchseekers to take them out. The Daughters of the Abyss ability makes them hard to take out with mortal wounds or psychic attacks. This ability won me a game against the Thousand Suns in the last RTT I went to. Magnus needed to wipe the unit, and with the 3-up feel no pains, I ended up having 2 left and holding that objective when I moved a tank onto it, and that won me the game. The ability to battle shock an enemy unit can be used to turn off defensive stratagems or reduce the enemy's unit to 0 if they were planning on using that unit to steal an objective by using the Overwatch stratagem. What I really like the Witchseekers for is the 6-inch scout ability that they do have, which allows them after the first turn roll to move 6 inches before the game starts. We can even put them inside a Psykana Rhino to give that Rhino a 6-inch scout move. I use this ability to scout a unit of Witchseekers towards the middle objective, while the second unit scouts towards my expansion objective. If facing a fast melee threat army, use these to extend a 6-inch charge block line. If we can use these to charge block some big charges, then we use our hard-hitting Custodes infantry to countercharge, and we are in a great place. The first detachment we're going to take a look at is the Auric Champions. The Auric Champions detachment rule is assemblage of might. At the start of your command phase, select one unit from your opponent's army. Until the start of your next command phase, each time a model in an Adeptus Custodes character unit from your army makes an attack that targets that enemy unit, add 1 to the wound roll. We can join the Knight Centura to the Witchseekers, making them a character unit, giving the unit access to assemblage of might for +1 to the wound roll. +1 to wound does make these more potent on the battlefield. We usually run these as 4 model units in our detachments, except for the Null, Maiden, Vigil, and possibly the new Lines of the Emperor detachment. I have not tried a max unit of these with the Knight Centura and the Auric Champions, but I can't see it being better than some of our other unit options. No stratagem support for the Witchseekers since they are not character models, and all the Auric Champion stratagems target Custodes character models. I still like to take 2 units of these in my Auric Champions list. The datasheet carries it for what we want the Witchseekers doing in our list: board control and secondary points. A 6-inch scout is good in any of our detachments. And that's the Auric Champions for the Witchseekers. Not the best, but still a good unit for secondary points. Now let's actually take a look at the brand new detachment, Lines of the Emperor, and how the Witchseekers perform in that detachment. Our detachment rule is against all odds. Each time Adeptus Custodes unit from your army makes an attack, if there's no other friendly units within 6 inches, add 1 to the hit roll and add 1 to the wound roll. The fact that this detachment rule works on all of our Psykana units opens up some new possible combinations. The +1 to hit does not really help the Witchseekers since they do have a torrent weapon, but the +1 to wound sure will. +1 to the wound roll really helps these low strength attacks hit much harder than normal. The Witchseekers have a strength 4 flamer, which is a great breakpoint for +1 to the wound. Witchseekers will now be wounding Space Marines on a 3+ and most Horde units on a 2+. And we do have some stratagem support for the Witchseekers. Some of the better ones here, we have Maneuver and Fire. This gives us a fallback, shoot, and charge. And this is not a stratagem we're going to be using on our smaller 4 model units. It could be useful when they are being tagged by an enemy unit from their consolidation move. On a big 10 model unit with a possible character, this could be very potent. 10d6 flamers, strength 4, AP 0, damage 1 with ignores cover, and with +1 to the wound roll from the detachment rule, is a damage profile worth keeping in the fight. So Maneuver and Fire on our big 10-man units could be worth it. We will probably not be using the charge part of the stratagem with the Witchseekers unless it is to steal an objective with numbers. We're mostly going to focus on the fallback and shoot with the Witchseekers. Next stratagem is Swift as an Eagle for 1 CP. This gives us a normal D6 move after an opponent has shot at one of our units. This is the most useful stratagem in the detachment for the Witchseekers. Being able to move the unit after being shot will keep these utility units on the board much longer. Have a model or 2 survive an attack, but more is on the way. As long as we are not looking for a 5 or 6 on the roll, moving these into some line of sight cover could be huge. The late game scoring potential for this detachment is fantastic. I think Lines of the Emperor might be the best or second best detachment for Psykana units now. Talons of the Emperor does add a lot of utility and synergy with the Custodes units. A smaller 4 model unit of Witchseekers won't get as much out of this detachment. They are for utility and scoring, not as much as an attack unit. A 10 model unit, however, could be a serious threat to Horde and light infantry units. +1 to the hit and wound roll from the detachment rule, and a D6 move after being shot stratagem is much more than most of the other detachments offer to our Witchseekers, besides Null Maiden, Talons of the Emperor, and now Lions of the Emperor. And that's the Witchseekers for the Lions of the Emperor detachment. Let's move on to the Shield Host detachment. Now on to the Shield Host detachment. The Shield Host detachment rule is Martial Mastery. At the start of the battle round, you can select one of the bullet points below. If you do so until the start of the next battle round, that bullet point effects apply. Each Adeptus Custodes model with the Martial Katala ability, melee weapons equipped by that model, gain the critical hits on 5 ability. Or we could pick each Adeptus Custodes model with the Martial Katala ability, melee weapons have +1 AP. This detachment has the least amount of Witchseeker support along with Solar Spearhead. The Witchseekers do not have the Martial Katala ability, so they cannot access the +1 AP or the crits on 5 from the detachment rule. All but one of these stratagems exclude Psykana models, and multi-potentiality for 1 CP is the only stratagem we can use on the Witchseekers, giving them the fallback, shoot, and charge. Once again, on a small 4 model unit, it's not really worth the 1 CP. We'll be wanting to use this on some of our big expensive Custodes units. And even though the Witchseekers have very little rule support in this detachment, I still like to have 1 or 2 units in my list for board control and secondary actions. Great for screening out turn 1 charges, making the enemy hit our Witchseekers first, and then countercharge them with our own strong melee units. Use your Psykana units to support your golden demigods. The next detachment is the detachment that was made for our Psykana units, the Null Maiden Vigil. And the detachment rule is Creeping Dread. It is an aura ability in the battle shock step of your opponent's command phase. If the enemy unit is either a Psykana unit or below starting strength and within 12 inches of one or more of our Psykana models from your army, that enemy unit must take a battle shock test, and if that unit is below half strength, subtract 1 from that battle shock test this phase instead. This is a detachment rule that does work on our Witchseekers. It does not make the unit stronger, but it does help us hand out more battle shock tests. This is my complaint about this detachment. Having an all Psykana unit detachment does not bother me. It's the fact that the detachment does not add enough power to our Psykana units. The Null Maiden Vigil does have more rule support than the other detachments for our Witchseekers though. And this is the one detachment, besides Lines of the Emperor, I would think of running these in a big 10 model unit. We could add a Knight Centura, but she only really adds the +2 movement and advance and charge, since her other abilities are more designed for other Psykana units, such as the Vigilators. There is no enhancements that I would want to spend on the Knight Centura that would buff the Witchseekers as well. It's not all bad news though, there are some stratagems that can be quite useful when used on the Witchseekers. The first one is Desperation's Price. At any phase just after an enemy psychic unit has finished using a psychic ability that targets a unit or finished making a psychic attack, and one of our Psykana units that is within 18 inches of that enemy psyker. That enemy psyker unit must take a battle shock test. If it is passed, that psyker's unit is battle shocked, and if that test is failed, that psyker unit suffers 3 mortal wounds and is battle shocked as well. This stratagem is opponent dependent since it only can be used after an enemy psyker unit has finished making a psychic ability or attack. Causing more battle shock is the main part of the stratagem. The flat 3 mortals is nice, but it is not going to be putting the fear into the enemy army. Use the battle shock to stop the enemy unit from using stratagems. Next up is Psychic Abominations for 1 CP. In your opponent's shooting phase, just after an enemy unit has selected its attacks, 1 Psykana infantry unit from your army. Until the end of the phase, your unit has the stealth ability, and battle shocked and psyker models can only select your unit as a target of ranged attacks if they're within 12 inches. Pretty much gives you a 12-inch lone op to battle shocked and psyker models, along with the stealth ability. This is one of the very few rules in this detachment that does add some survivability to our Witchseekers. Stealth for -1 to the hit roll against range attacks, as well as a 12-inch lone op against any enemy psyker or battle shocked units. A stratagem better used on a larger Witchseeker unit to get the most out of the 1 CP cost. Last up, and one of my favorite ones, is Purgation Sweep for 1 CP, and this is Witchseeker unit only, and this will add 1 to the attack of their torrent weapons. If the target is a psyker or battle shocked unit, add 2 to the attacks instead. This is another stratagem better used on a maximum 10 model unit. 4 extra attacks on a 4 model unit is not that impressive. 10 extra attacks to a possible 20 if the target is battle shocked or a psyker unit, much better. It's not going to burn the world down, but it will help into horde and light infantry targets. The Witchseekers fill a different role in the Null, Maiden, Vigil detachment. The prosecutors are our secondary scoring units, while big 10 model units of Witchseekers become our anti-chaff units. The Vigilators are our heavy hitters. A lot of the damage dealing rules are for the Vigilator units. 10 Witchseekers and a Rhino does give that Rhino a 6-inch scope move. This detachment, more than any of the others, really needs some more unit options. 3 infantry units, a Rhino, 1 name character, and a generic character just isn't enough to build a 2,000 point army. And that's the Null, Maiden, Vigil. Let's move on to the Solar Spearhead. Here is the Solar Spearhead detachment. The detachment rule has 2 different parts, Auric Armor and Moratory Ancients. Both of these you do have to be a vehicle or a walker unit to have access to, which the Witchseekers are not. So let's move on to some other rules in this detachment that might support the Witchseekers. And like I said, the detachment rule will not benefit the Witchseekers. It does have 3 stratagems we could use on the Witchseekers though. Emperor's Vengeance for 1 CP gives us a 4+ fight on death, but we're not going to be spending 1 CP for Witchseekers to fight on death. Punishment Inescapable for 1 CP. This can be used on Psykana models, but it gives the unit ignores cover and ignore ballistic skill modifiers, which the Witchseekers already have torrent and ignore cover. So once again, not a stratagem we're going to be using. The last one is Wrathful Advance for 1 CP, a D3+3 pylon, and we're not going to be charging with our Witchseekers unless it is to steal an objective, but out of the 3 that we can use on the Witchseekers, this is the one that I would use, but it's very, very situational. Another detachment that even though there's not much detachment support, they still fill that chaff utility unit role. Psykana units are very useful in the Solar Spearhead. We don't want to be spending our turn having our awesome dreadnoughts cleaning objectives or containing board edges. Now let's move on to our final detachment, the Talons of the Emperor. On to our last detachment, the Talons of the Emperor. The Talons of the Emperor detachment rule is Revered Companions. It has 2 different parts. Psykana units from your army gain the following ability. Null Aegis. While an Adeptus Custodes unit is within 6 inches of this unit, models in that unit have a 5 funeral pain against psychic attacks and mortal wounds. The other part of this detachment rule, all other Adeptus Custodes units from your army gain the following ability. So this will be any units that are not Psykana units. while a Psykana unit is within 6 inches of this unit each time a model in that Psykana unit makes an attack, add 1 to the hit roll. The Talons of the Emperor detachment rule encourage us to bring multiple Psykana units. They do not need to be big expensive units. Small 4-model units of Witchseekers are great in this detachment. They will not benefit from the +1 to the hit since they use a Torrent auto-hit weapon, but they can be within 6 inches of a Custodes unit to give it a 5-up feel no pain to mortal wounds and psychic attacks, and that could be huge since our big expensive Custodes units are weak to mortal wounds. And this alone is worth taking a unit or 2 of Witchseekers in a Talons of the Emperor list. We could join the Witchseekers with a Knight Centura for the movement abilities, but we do not want big expensive Psykana units in the Talons of the Emperor. Like all of the other detachments, even the Null, Maiden, Vigil, there isn't an enhancement that I would want to spend the points on the Knight Centura and that enhancement to buff the Witchseekers enough for it to be worth the points. If we really wanted a way to spread a big bubble of 5+ feel no pain, we could take 10 Witchseekers, attach a Knight Centura to increase that unit's Null Aegis aura from 6 inches to 9 inches. The way a lot of the Talons of the Emperor stratagems work is if a Psykana unit and a non-Psykana unit are within 6 inches of each other, they both can benefit from the stratagem. Some of these will not make that much difference on the Witchseekers, but there are a few I would keep in mind since they can really make a difference in a game. The first one is Empiric Severance for 1 CP in your opponent's shooting or the fight phase, 1 Adeptus Custodes unit from the army that is within 6 inches of a Psykana unit. You can have a 4+ feel no pain to psychic attacks and mortal wounds. The Witchseekers already have a 3+ feel no pain to mortals and psychic. What we want to use the Witchseekers for is to be within 6 inches of a big Custodes unit, perhaps some Alaris Terminators. Then we could use this stratagem on the Alaris to give them a 4+ feel no pain to mortals and psychic damage. It's not a stratagem that will power up the Witchseekers' damage, but it will add to their utility in this detachment. Shield of Honor for 1 CP in your opponent's shooting phase, 1 Psykana unit that is targeted by the enemy and within 6 inches of a friendly Custodes infantry unit. Until the end of the phase, any attacks that target our Psykana unit must instead target that Adeptus Custodes unit, unless it is not an eligible target. This stratagem can be used to keep our Witchseekers safe. Another stratagem that does not increase the Witchseekers' damage, but we can use it to direct the ranged attacks that would normally kill our Witchseekers into some tough as nails wardens who are within 6 inches and visible to the enemy. This is a very CP hungry detachment. This is not a stratagem we'll be using every turn, but when it does come up, it can be very helpful. Having the Witchseekers do an action, and if anything shoots at them, use this stratagem to keep them safe. There is some plays we can use Shield of Honor on, but like I said, it is a CP hungry detachment. Next up is Talon Pincer for 1 CP in your opponent's movement phase. If they end a normal, advance, or fallback move within 9 inches of one of our Custodes units, we can make a normal move up to 6 inches. And this is one of the stratagems that if you do have a Psykana unit and a Custodes unit within 6 inches, you can actually select both of these units to do that normal 6-inch reactive move. The best stratagem for our Custodes units remains the best for our Psykana units. And this is great for extending charges or moving the Witchseekers units in front of our Custodes units to charge block or vice versa. Usually not a stratagem we will use just on the Witchseekers themselves. Instead, if they are within 6 inches of another unit we want to use this stratagem on or setting up a play. This is a normal move as well, so we could use it to move within range to embark within a Psykana Rhino. So there are some tricksy things you can do with Talon Pincer. That is one of the reasons this is the best stratagem in this detachment. Then we have Talons Interlock for 1 CP. This adds +1 strength and +1 AP to a unit's ranged weapons. This is another stratagem that if we had a small Witchseekers unit within 6 inches of a Custodes unit, such as the Draxus and Custodian Guard unit, they would enjoy the +1 strength and +1 AP on their ranged weapons. A big 10 model unit with the Knight Centura, this could be worth using this stratagem on just for that unit. +1 strength and +1 AP on 11d6 torrent shots would barbecue light to medium infantry units. One of the very few stratagems in all of our detachments that boost the Witchseekers' damage output. We also have the fallback, shoot and charge stratagem, and like the Shield Host and other fallback, shoot and charge stratagems, we're only really going to be focusing on the fallback and shoot part of that stratagem. Not something we're going to be using on the smaller units, but once again on a big unit it could be worth the CP. This detachment seems to have more support for the Witchseekers than the Null, Maiden, Vigil detachment now that I've broken down all of these detachments. The only thing is, we usually do not take the big units of Witchseekers in the Talons of the Emperor. There is some merit to bringing a big brick of 10 Witchseekers to use the Talons interlocked for 1 CP to boost their strength and AP by 1. Although units of 4 and a Rhino to give that Rhino a 6-inch move is the most common use of Witchseekers in the Talons of the Emperor detachment. And that is what I would recommend as well, is just these smaller units of Witchseekers in this detachment. And that's all 6 Adeptus Custodes detachments for the Witchseekers. Let's move on to some final thoughts. I hope I have convinced some of my fellow 10,000 to try out your Witchseeker models. They may not hit as hard as our Custodes infantry, but they are important to our scoring and screening potential. I like the Witchseekers for grabbing early board control or extending a charge block line. If you do have any questions about the Witchseekers or any of these detachments, throw it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, subscribe for weekly battle reports, list videos, and other Warhammer 40K content. And like always, thanks for watching, thanks for stopping by.